Narrator, tone, serious. The night was tranquil at Angel Maternity Hospital. Emily lay on the hospital bed, staring out at the pitch-black night. The room was vast and silent, with only her faint breathing breaking the stillness, which inexplicably made her uneasy. She gazed out the window, her hand unconsciously moving to her abdomen.
Just a day ago, a tiny life had been growing there. Sometimes, the little one would move gently, responding to my touch. Yes, it was our child, James's and mine. The feeling was truly wonderful.
Narrator, tone, serious. Click, click, click. The sharp sound of high heels against the floor echoed from the hallway. Emily wondered why someone would visit so late. The sound stopped right outside her door. Narrator, tone, serious. A pair of slender, alabaster arms pushed open the door. A woman with exquisite makeup and an elegant figure walked in, looking at Emily with a haughty expression. Suddenly, she let out a mocking laugh.
Look at that face, brimming with happiness. Do you think you're the luckiest woman in the world right now?
You're not welcome here. Please leave.
Narrator, tone, serious. A glaring red booklet was thrown onto the pristine white blanket covering Emily. It was so bright it hurt her eyes. Sophia stared intently into Emily's eyes and smiled slightly.
James and I got married.
Narrator, tone, sad. Emily couldn't believe her ears. With trembling hands, she opened the booklet and saw the photos of James and Sophia inside. Married? How could it be? She and James had a child together, and he had promised to marry her once the baby was born. How could he now be married to Sophia instead?
No, I don't believe it.
Narrator, tone, sad. Emily screamed with all her might, but her weak body made her realize how powerless her outcry was. Narrator, tone, serious. A steady male voice suddenly spoke, silencing the room.
Starting tomorrow, you won't be returning to the James household.
Narrator, tone, serious. Emily looked at the man who had appeared at the door, surprised. He had always been so busy that he couldn't even be there for her delivery. Why was he here now? Narrator, tone, serious. Emily's unease grew stronger. James walked over, wrapping his arm around Sophia's waist and planting a gentle kiss on her cheek. He was so tender, unlike his usual stern and commanding self.
From now on, James, will have only one wife. Sophia.
Narrator, tone, sad. Sophia, Sophia. What had happened? How had everything changed in an instant?
Sophia and I reconciled a year ago. Sophia couldn't risk her figure by having a baby, so we had you carry the child. The child will be raised by the James family. You don't need to worry about it.
Narrator, tone, sad. A year ago? He suddenly let go of Sophia and walked to Emily's bedside, bending down to whisper in her ear.
I'll give you a sum of money. Don't act like a pitiful woman. $1 million for borrowing your womb, it's a fair deal. Tomorrow, take the money and leave with your good-for-nothing ex-boyfriend.
Narrator, tone, sad. $1 million for her womb? Emily could never have imagined that such words would come out of James's mouth. They had been so in love before. Narrator, tone, reflective. When he found out he was going to be a father, he had hugged her over and over again, his face filled with genuine joy.
Emily, tone, trembling. Since you've already married someone else.
Narrator, tone, weak. A wave of weakness washed over her, making her head spin. Emily steadied herself before continuing.
Emily, tone, determined. The child is mine. I can't give her to you. I want to take her with me.
Narrator, tone, sad. With that, she tried to get out of bed. As soon as her bare toes touched the cold marble floor, her wrist was suddenly gripped tightly, and the world seemed to turn upside down. It wasn't until the back of her head touched the soft down pillow and the thin blanket was back over her that Emily felt the world quiet down again.
James, Tone, angry in your current state, how do you think you can take care of this child?
Narrator, Tone, mocking. He paused, then suddenly laughed mockingly.
James, Tone, mocking. What, is the money not enough for you?
Narrator, Tone, sad. Emily felt as if a bucket of icy water had been poured over her, drenching her to the bone. Why had he never believed that she was with him simply because she loved him? Narrator, Tone, reflective. Heaven knows, she had fallen for James not because he was the CEO of Zhang Group, not because he was wealthy, but because he was who he was. But no matter how many times Emily said this, James never seemed to hear it. Or perhaps, from the beginning, he had never believed her.
Sophia, Tone, soothing. Don't be angry, James.
Narrator, Tone, cheerful. Sophia swayed her slender waist as she walked over to James, gently soothing his heaving chest with her soft voice.
James, Tone, relieved. Sophia, you're always the most considerate.
Narrator, Tone, sad. Lying in bed, Emily felt the post-surgery pain that had kept her awake at night, and Sophia's triumphant glances made her realize that no physical pain could compare to the heart-wrenching agony she felt now. The husband who should have been hers now belonged to another woman, and the child she had carried for 10 months was about to be taken from her. Narrator, Tone, desperate. A pair of pale, bloodless hands suddenly grabbed the corner of James's suit. Emily used all her remaining strength to plead.
Emily, Tone, desperate, please, don't take my child away from me. I'll do anything you ask, just don't separate me from my child, please.
Narrator, Tone, frozen. James froze for a moment. But the things she had done before, he couldn't tolerate them. No other man could accept them either. But seeing Emily's desperate plea, he couldn't harden his heart. After all, separating a mother from her child was too cruel. Narrator, Tone, disgusted. With a look of disgust, James pulled his suit from Emily's grasp, not even wanting to touch her.
James, Tone, serious. Remember, from now on, you're just a servant in the Zhang family. You and I have nothing to do with each other.
Emily's unease grew stronger. James walked over, wrapping his arm around Sophia's waist and planting a gentle kiss on her cheek. He was so tender, unlike his usual stern and commanding self.
From now on, I, James, will have only one wife. Turns to look at Sophia. Sophia.
Sophia. What had happened? How had everything changed in an instant?
Sophia and I reconciled a year ago. Sophia couldn't risk her figure by having a baby, so we had you carry the child. The child will be raised by the James family. You don't need to worry about it.
A year ago? He suddenly let go of Sophia and walked to Emily's bedside, bending down to whisper in her ear.
I'll give you a sum of money. Don't act like a pitiful woman. $1 million for borrowing your womb. It's a fair deal. Tomorrow, take the money and leave with your good-for-nothing ex-boyfriend.
Emily's unease grew stronger. James walked over, wrapping his arm around Sophia's waist and planting a gentle kiss on her cheek. He was so tender, unlike his usual stern and commanding self.
From now on, I, James, will have only one wife. Sophia.
Sophia. What had happened? How had everything changed in an instant?
Sophia and I reconciled a year ago. Sophia couldn't risk her figure by having a baby, so we had you carry the child. The child will be raised by the James family. You don't need to worry about it.
A year ago?
James suddenly let go of Sophia and walked to Emily's bedside, bending down to whisper in her ear.
I'll give you a sum of money. Don't act like a pitiful woman. $1 million for your help, it's a fair deal. Tomorrow, take the money and leave with your ex-boyfriend.
James's face was slightly flushed, and the smell of alcohol was evident even before he got close. Today, the Zhang group had reached a cooperation agreement with the Song group. At the banquet, James, who rarely drank, had a few more glasses than usual.
Why can't I shake the image of Emily's worried face from my mind? Clenches fists and pounds doorframe. Emily, Emily.
Sir, let me take you home.
James shook his head, pushing John away, and unsteadily opened the car door to get in. John quickly got into the driver's seat, ready to drive James to the Zhang Shuai Villa District, another of James's homes.
Wait. Opens bleary eyes, go to the western suburbs.
The more he loved, the more he hated. He hated it so much that he couldn't stand being in the same place where they had spent time together. Standing at the door, he heard Sophia's voice as soon as he entered. She was probably stirring up trouble again.
So noisy.
Already in a bad mood, James yanked off his tie and took a few steps forward, snatching the items from Emily's hands and pulling her toward another bedroom. He quickly shut the door behind them. All the chaos was left outside the door, and the world finally quieted down.
James, what are you doing?
Emily, I want to take a bath.
Emily's body stiffened. Memories flooded back. James rarely got drunk, but every time he did, she would prepare his bath and take care of everything. When drunk, James was as quiet as a child. Feeling her stiffness, James suddenly let go of her as if pricked by a needle and turned into the bathroom.
Leave.
He almost forgot Emily's betrayal. He remembered one night when he woke up feeling unwell from drinking. The person who should have been by his side was gone. Worried she might be scared, he forced himself up despite the headache to find her, only to hear her talking to another man.
He's resting after drinking. Can we meet tomorrow?
James tried to convince himself it was just a normal call, that Emily had gone to another room to avoid disturbing him. But the next day, he couldn't help but follow her and saw her in Michael's arms. She was with him but still in contact with her ex-boyfriend. Emily, she had let him down too much. James would never forget that day. From then on, he had no love left for her, only hate. He would never let her have an easy life, never. Emily's unease grew stronger. James walked over and wrapped his arm around Sophia's waist, planting a gentle kiss on her cheek. He was so tender, unlike his usual stern and commanding self.
From now on, I, James, will have only one wife. Sophia.
Sophia. What had happened? How had everything changed in an instant?
Sophia and I reconciled a year ago. Sophia couldn't risk her figure by having a baby, so we had you carry the child. The child will be raised by the James family. You don't need to worry about it.
A year ago? He suddenly let go of Sophia and walked to Emily's bedside, bending down to whisper in her ear.
I'll give you a sum of money. Don't act like a pitiful woman. $1 million for borrowing your home, it's a fair deal. Tomorrow, take the money and leave with your good-for-nothing ex-boyfriend.
Emily couldn't sleep all night. She got up early, and when she did, Mrs. Johnson was already making breakfast. Emily took a deep breath, composed herself, and forced a bright smile as she rolled up her sleeves to help Mrs. Johnson prepare breakfast.
Emily, you're up? Breakfast is almost ready. If you have nothing to do, go upstairs and take care of Miss Lily. She should be waking up soon.
Emily nodded and went upstairs to take care of Lily. The little baby, not even 2 months old, was so adorable that all of Emily's worries vanished the moment she saw her. James slept in late, suffering from a hangover. Recalling the unusual feelings he had for Emily the night before, fueled by alcohol, he shook his head, deciding not to think about it. Annoyed, he grabbed his robe and left the room, his eyes inadvertently catching sight of Emily bustling around in Lily's room. The bright sunlight bathed her, making her look like a lively little sprite from the depths of a forest. Her every movement seemed to dance lightly in his heart, effortlessly dispelling his morning grumpiness. He quickly averted his gaze, refusing to think about anything related to Emily. When he went downstairs for breakfast, Sophia was already seated at the table, laughing happily at something on her phone.
I knew Grace had no good intentions. She even bought articles to slander me. Luckily, I found out and suppressed them. James, look, now the internet is full of praise for my acting skills.
Pulling out a chair to sit down, acknowledging Sophia.
The cutthroat world of finance was already exhausting enough for him. He had no interest in Sophia's petty rivalries in the entertainment industry.
That woman, I'll make sure she knows how formidable I am.
If you have time, read a book or work on your acting skills. Focusing on these trivial matters all day is tiring for both of us. Taking a bite of his bread and picking up the financial newspaper beside him, reading intently.
Sophia wanted to argue but saw James frown slightly and kept silent, obediently eating her breakfast.
Suddenly, there was a loud noise from upstairs, followed by a heavy thud. At this time, the only people upstairs besides Lily were Emily.
Realizing this, James immediately threw down his newspaper and rushed upstairs in a panic. Sophia remained seated, quietly eating her bread, a victorious smile playing on her lips. When James reached the top of the stairs, he saw Emily lying on the floor, her face pale, lips colorless, and blood slowly seeping from the back of her head.
Emily! Glancing at the broken chair, quickly picking her up and rushing downstairs, brushing past Sophia, who was coming up. Mrs. Johnson, call an ambulance.
Mrs. Johnson came out of the kitchen, startled by the scene, and hurried to make the call.
James found a towel to stop Emily's bleeding. The person in his arms was already semi-conscious.
Emily, hang in there, just a bit longer.
Emily's unease grew stronger. James walked over, wrapping his arm around Sophia's waist and planting a gentle kiss on her cheek. He was so tender, unlike his usual stern and commanding self.
From now on, James, will have only one wife. Sophia.
Sophia. What had happened? How had everything changed in an instant?
Sophia and I reconciled a year ago. Sophia couldn't risk her figure by having a baby, so we had you carry the child. The child will be raised by the James family. You don't need to worry about it.
A year ago? He suddenly let go of Sophia and walked to Emily's bedside, bending down to whisper in her ear.
I'll give you a sum of money. Don't act like a pitiful woman. $1 million for borrowing your home, it's a fair deal. Tomorrow, take the money and leave with your good-for-nothing ex-boyfriend.
The Zhang family had never encountered such an incident before. They generally trusted their servants' loyalty, so security wasn't a major concern. As a result, when this happened, there was no way to trace it. Emily suddenly thought of something. If her suspicions were correct, the real target was Lily, not her. She was just an unintended pawn, causing chaos in the Zhang family and diverting James's attention away from Lily.
Lily is in danger. I need to go back immediately.
A pair of arms suddenly enveloped her, holding her tightly and preventing any struggle. She heard James's angry voice above her.
You're still on in 4. Where do you think you're going?
Emily continued to struggle, but James quickly tried to comfort her.
Lily is fine.
While you were unconscious, I had Mrs. Johnson take care of her around the clock.
I check on her every day. What are you so worried about?
Hearing this, Emily's emotions finally calmed down. She pushed James away with all her strength, her innocent eyes looking at him.
You must protect Lily.
She didn't care about her own injuries, but Lily was the only connection she had left with James. She had to protect her.
I will.
James reassured her, patting her back and helping her lie down again. His eyes caught the sight of the blood returning to Emily's hand, and he suddenly felt a pang of guilt.
Doesn't it hurt?
Following his gaze, Emily shook her head firmly.
It's fine, don't worry.
She turned to look at James and suddenly smiled.
Look at you, always so meticulous about your appearance, and now you haven't even shaved.
James was taken aback for a moment. He touched his chin, feeling the stubble. He smiled back, then went into the bathroom attached to the hospital room to freshen up.
Emily smiled faintly. It had been a long time since she had seen James smile like that. It warmed her heart, like the gentle sunshine outside the window.
You've been lying here for days. Let me take you outside to get some sun.
James, now freshly groomed, looked dazzling in his sharp suit, like an international movie star. Looking at him, Emily couldn't help but be captivated by his handsome appearance. She nodded her head naturally. The sunshine outside was wonderful, and the flowers in the garden were in full bloom, lifting her spirits. James somehow found a wheelchair. Emily had never sat in one before. She thought she could manage on her own, but James insisted on pushing her, saying that since she got hurt in his house, he should take some responsibility. James, showing rare tenderness.
Look at these daisies, they're so beautiful. And these roses are lovely too. What are these? They're gorgeous.
James pushed Emily through the garden, his face darkening as she admired the flowers left and right. She had been hesitant to let him push her at first, but now she was directing him with ease.
Is beautiful the only word you know?
James rolled his eyes at Emily, who was too engrossed in the flowers to notice. Despite the fatigue, the bright sunshine, the beautiful flowers, and the lovely company made the happiness outweigh everything else. Emily was lost in the beauty of the flowers when suddenly a large shadow loomed over her. In an instant, the world was bright again.
Emily's unease grew stronger. James walked over, wrapping his arm around Sophia's waist and planting a gentle kiss on her cheek.
From now on, James, will have only one wife.
Sophia.
Sophia. What had happened? How had everything changed in an instant?
Sophia and I reconciled a year ago.
Sophia couldn't risk her figure by having a baby, so we had you carry the child. The child will be raised by the James family.
You don't need to worry about it.
A year ago? He suddenly let go of Sophia and walked to Emily's bedside, bending down to whisper in her ear.
I'll give you a sum of money. Don't act like a pitiful woman. $1 million for borrowing your home, it's a fair deal. Tomorrow, take the money and leave with your good-for-nothing ex-boyfriend.
Emily's unease grew stronger as James walked over to Sophia, wrapping his arm around her waist and planting a gentle kiss on her cheek.
He was so tender, so unlike his usual stern and commanding self.
From now on, James, will have only one wife. Sophia.
Sophia. What had happened? How had everything changed in an instant?
Sophia and I reconciled a year ago. Sophia couldn't risk her figure by having a baby, so we had you carry the child. The child will be raised by the James family. You don't need to worry about it.
A year ago? He suddenly let go of Sophia and walked to Emily's bedside, bending down to whisper in her ear.
I'll give you a sum of money. Don't act like a pitiful woman. $1 million for borrowing your womb, it's a fair deal. Tomorrow, take the money and leave with your good-for-nothing ex-boyfriend.
Mrs. Johnson, please call the police for us, but make sure no one else finds out. Don't tell anyone else for now, I'll handle the situation tonight.
But
Mrs. Johnson had no choice but to follow Emily's instructions. At 7 p.m., Emily and James arrived at the edge of the forest. At 7:05 p.m., Emily received another text message instructing them to go to a small cabin deeper in the woods. To be cautious, James hid a small knife in his pocket. Soon, Emily saw the cabin mentioned in the text. There was light inside. James had Emily hide behind him as they cautiously approached the cabin. Pushing the door open, Emily immediately saw Lily on a small bed, her chest rising and falling gently as she slept peacefully.
What have you done to her?
Emily looked at Sophia, who was sitting by Lily's bed. Her hair was disheveled, and she stared blankly at the peacefully sleeping Lily, her fingernails lightly tracing Lily's soft face as she murmured.
If only James and I had a child.
If they had a child, maybe James would still think of her, instead of becoming increasingly heartless. She was filled with resentment. She had loved James for so many years, but in the end, it was all for nothing.
Be careful, Sophia has lost her mind.
Sophia noticed this gesture and suddenly stood up, pulling out a knife and pointing it at them.
Don't come any closer. If you do, I'll hurt her.
All right, don't harm Lily.
Emily glanced around the small cabin. It wasn't big, with just a bed inside. It didn't seem like Sophia had any accomplices. Sophia looked at them from under her messy hair, then pulled out 2 more knives and threw them at their feet.
Only one of you can leave here alive. Otherwise, I'll make sure she never wakes up.
She glanced at Lily lying on the bed and, seeing that James and Emily hadn't moved, grew impatient.
Hurry up! Do you want her to die?
Emily and James looked at the knives at their feet, then at Lily lying on the bed, and reluctantly bent down to pick them up. At that moment, James whispered in Emily's ear.
Don't worry about me, save Lily.
Did James mean for her to harm him? Emily looked at James standing in front of her, unable to bring herself to use the knife.
James.
Emily, don't be afraid. If only one of us can survive, I want it to be you. Promise me, no matter what, you'll live well.
James looked at Emily with deep affection. Then he threw his knife far away and opened his arms towards Emily.
Come on, Emily, saving Lily is more important.
Emily held the knife, tears welling up in her eyes. No, she couldn't let James die. James smiled at her and slowly walked towards her. Emily took a step back, but James suddenly grabbed her shoulders and pulled her into his arms. She heard his gentle voice in her ear.
Emily, I love you.
Emily stared blankly as James let go of her. Her gaze involuntarily dropped, and her hands began to tremble. James's waist was already stained with crimson.
James!
What a pair of star-crossed lovers.
Sophia stood calmly by the bed, watching everything unfold. She finally understood that all her previous efforts had been in vain. James was even willing to give his life for her. Narrator, tone, sad how laughable she was. Emily couldn't believe her eyes as James, bleeding from his wound, collapsed to the ground. She rushed over, but James's eyes were already slowly closing.
James, don't fall asleep.
James remained motionless. Her vision blurred with tears. Sophia walked over from the bedside, standing nearby, smiling at Emily.
How wonderful. If I can't have him, neither can you.
Sophia, you won't have a good end.
A good end? After what you've done to me, how could I have a good end? As long as you, Emily, accompany me to the grave, I have no regrets.
Sophia gripped the sharp knife tightly and suddenly lunged at Emily. Just as Emily was about to resist, a hand suddenly grabbed Sophia's wrist, twisting it forcefully and pinning her arm behind her back. No matter how much Sophia struggled, it was futile.
Emily, quickly tie her up.
James, clutching his wound, used all his strength to restrain the struggling Sophia. Emily immediately reacted. At that moment, the door to the small room was kicked open, and numerous armed police officers stood outside. Seeing the situation inside, they rushed in to help James subdue Sophia. James, seeing the scene, glanced at Lily lying on the bed and finally closed his eyes in relief, collapsing heavily.
James!
In the last second before sleep, he seemed to hear the call he longed for the most. In his dream, everything was hazy and unclear. Just as he was about to wake up, a wave of pain washed over him.
Ah!
The person keeping vigil by his side anxiously looked over.
What's wrong? Are you uncomfortable?
James opened his bleary eyes, and a familiar face came into view.
Emily? Is it too hot?
Emily touched James's forehead and then her own, finding nothing unusual.
I'm fine. How long have I been asleep?
I feel like I've slept for a long time. My back is sore.
Emily quickly grabbed a pillow to place behind his back. A pleasant fragrance filled his nostrils, and James couldn't help but take a deep breath.
Lily?
Who?
Emily looked up.
Lily just ate a bit too much and is sleeping soundly. Nothing serious. Sophia has caused quite a stir online and has been taken to prison. The incident with Michael has also been investigated. It was Sophia who had someone set fire to the apartment. She can't turn back now.
Emily remembered something and said happily.
The day before you woke up, Michael also woke up.
Michael, who had been asleep for so long, had woken up. Emily's unease grew stronger. James walked over, wrapping his arm around Sophia's waist and planting a gentle kiss on her cheek. He was so tender, unlike his usual stern and commanding self.
Serious, from now on, James, will have only one wife. Sophia.
Sophia. What had happened? How had everything changed in an instant?
Cold, Sophia and I reconciled a year ago. Sophia couldn't risk her figure by having a baby, so we had you carry the child. The child will be raised by the James family. You don't need to worry about it.
A year ago? He suddenly let go of Sophia and walked to Emily's bedside, bending down to whisper in her ear.
Whispering, I'll give you a sum of money. Don't act like a pitiful woman. $1 million for borrowing your womb, it's a fair deal. Tomorrow, take the money and leave with your good-for-nothing ex-boyfriend.